The poems I'm going to read tonight are from Twice Told, which is a book that should be coming out soon, I think. I'm not sure. Any minute now. Maybe it's out already. I don't know. And so there's some, I think of them now as kind of old new poems. And I'll just go ahead and jump right in. The first one's called Rumors. Have you guys ever heard rumors? Okay. Rumors. You are telling this story. You are telling this story again. Twice told, you tell him the story someone he knows told you. You know the same someone, the same story, but different aspects and facets. You were not present in this story, but in one story he was, and it was told to you by someone you both know. You tell him another story about himself that even he didn't know, but you knew. You've known about his story for quite some time without knowing him, and he knows you. He recalls when you first told a story, not the one you are telling right now, but still true. You keep telling, you want to keep telling him, and so you do, and he does too. And at first you are standing in the same place, not telling the story, just clues, because you knew that you were going to tell this story, and it alarms you that you knew. Your sudden sentence is closing the room. He is telling a story that is oddly similar to the story told by you. It might be a part of the same story, a larger story, larger than you, or your telling of the story, or is telling it back to you anew. But by now, there is just one story with two tellers, and it endures through both the telling and the endless loop that continues with or without you. Old wars. You are trying to remember how it happened. You are trying to remember these events in a sensible order. The narrator, you think, met the old woman on a train. She had been to war, or at least you think you recall reading that she said she had. The story started on the train. The narrator in this case was mostly incidental. The narrator in this case was made to listen patiently and account for. The woman's tale, you recall, was too strange to be told straight. You needed to hear it from a distance, from another mouth or source. The narrator met this woman on a train. She had been to war. The story was about the woman and her experiences at war, or more precisely in it, as a victim in a corpse, and someone who was marched straight to and through the brink of death, who gazed deep into death's vile and wintry irises before saving the crowd of innocent people she had been marching with. They were on the side of the road. You remember this detail. They were on a dusty black road being marched to death, and you know this because the narrator is delivering this information within a story via another story, a story told by the same old woman who may or may not have existed, whom he may or may not have met on a train, who may or may not, but most likely was a part of the war. She was not a hero. She must have been a hero, you think, for having protected all of those people, for sacrificing her own soul, her own hands, her own fragile sense of self, and yet there are no heroes here. Not the patient narrator, not you for trying to remember, not even the woman who told the story, for war knows no heroes and makes a fool of every witness, which, right now, through memory, is both you and this incidental narrator and whomever you are telling the story to. You are trying to remember how it happened. was a woman on a train. This woman told a story not to you, but you read the story that she told from the narrator's point of view, and now you know it. How she abandoned her own consciousness to swap bodies with the officer. She parted with her own old heart. She left her mind behind. She became a monster and a master, and through this brave and magical transformation was able to save a small population of souls, or so she said that day to the one you know as her trainmate.
Nope, that was not me. That was me. It was really good.
Thanks.
I thought it was really good, I just didn't make that stuff.
I just recognize that's the sound you do make. I have to like come over here and go back over here. Okay. Telephone. There was fear involved, yes. Some fear and hesitancy to discuss what you knew you had done, but had not yet told anyone. It was nothing. You discussed it for hours. All that nothing and what nothing meant, what a shame it would be to allow the nothing to decay, to fade and fly and die like all those nothings that you both had had before. It felt like a new nothing. But you knew instinctually in your frantic animal soul that all nothing sustains itself the same way, by expanding, cracking, swallowing itself and all around it, by colliding with old nothings. You knew and discussed what a nothing all your nothing was, and yet you could not find an end to it. This kind of nothing kept going. It kept going into itself and back out again around the day, winding itself through you and whispering things concerning you across the wire and in sleep's abysmal strangle. And after all that talk, you felt true, like a new version of yourself you never knew, a version of the very dreadful nothing that you had always had a vision of yourself becoming. 4 dead men. He took a solitary walk across the region. He couldn't stop, he couldn't stop, he couldn't pause, he couldn't stop. He sought to circle the space. He needed to circle the space, you see. He needed to see the place, you see. He could only fathom the place he knew you see if he saw it plainly as he circled, and you heard that he recorded his thoughts on the walk at the hospital. His walk began, so the story goes, as the dog days were drawing to an end. It was the finish of one mood and the commencement of another. He was going to conclude unmoving. He knew, you see, he would eventually break down immobile, you know, only realizing in retrospect, after the act of walking, but before recording, that he could remember the faces he encountered if he began to watch once more. If he took a walk around the region in his mind, if he recalled the damage that he'd done and wrote it down. At that time, this man, this first dead man, was attempting to make things appear, you see. He was attempting to reclaim that which in his mind had wholly vanished. He was feeling, in fact, a little apparitional. He was attempting to think himself healthy, you know. He wanted to walk himself well, and so he wrote down what he saw, and you experienced what he saw within the stretched and spooky spiraling sentences that unraveled and expanded as a rough path parallels a road that no one is headed down. They wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. He disclosed, you know, in prose, the destruction of important historical buildings. He witnessed the wreck of ancient languages. He saw old ruins, which recalled him to new ruins, some of which he was seeing again in his mind, and some of which he read about, and some of which you were reading about him reading about, and some of which he knew from the very few people he had stopped long enough to talk to. This man, this first dead man, admired the wildest gardens, you know, but he also couldn't stop imagining his past friends' faces. He wrote he couldn't stop thinking dead strangers' thoughts. You read he couldn't stop, he couldn't stop, he couldn't stop and didn't want to. You are shocked now abruptly up from a page on which he is describing the interesting history of herring, to see another man hovering here in your doorway. This other man, this second man, is living and you love him, but he can't stop, he can't see, you can't stop, he can't see. He needs someone to take him to the hospital. He needs someone to circle his sickness. He needs you and only you to circle his circles, and he needs you and only you to attend to his sickness. But you're not. You're going to fucking stop. You read instead a book about a man who has recently been in the hospital. This man is leaving in part to see the now empty home of a friend who had recently passed, in part perhaps because he too should have remained in the hospital. Instead, this man, this third man dead, is visiting his friend's home just after he died, a suicide, with the hope that he, this third dead man, could inhabit again the tone and humor and luminous, brilliant, beautiful, significant, wonderful, loving, tortured, sorrowful, stagnant, angry, awesome, puzzled, tragic, hurtful, magic, difficult mind of his dear friend during the time in which he still survived, when this man was not yet ill, but lived instead to write about architecture and remarkable buildings.
Woo!
Yes, only 3 of the 4 are dead now, but who knows? One more? Mausoleum? I'm sorry, this is the one, it's the one in the book that I think is the love poem, but the real love poem. I'm relentless, guys. Relentless. It's the worst. Mausoleum. You'll feel good. It'll get better. Mausoleum. The night behaved exactly as you thought it would, as you saw it would, as you saw it unfold and unravel and pre-occur in a previously you now know prescient premonition. The details are irrelevant. You saw the night tumble forth anxiously with rare nerves, as if swerving away from a ghost train. Perhaps it was almost dusk. There was, or maybe there could have been, a dreadful storm, but there was no storm. You had the feeling that it was later than it really was. Maybe it was a different day, or if the same day. Then you saw this day tilt and stretch and sway and strain itself against the previously aforementioned vision, as, to be honest, at this point, you knew it would. The version of the night you saw occurred as a sudden shot straight through the actual night that was just about to start occurring. The night tried to hold itself upright, tried to be true to its given name, to remain faithful and patient, such a great trait through sorrow and flawed stakes, through the terrible rest of dreamers, each reading their own imperceptible story. You were worried. The precise details are irrelevant. The events of the night occurred as observed, not set forth by you but seen into and through, planned perhaps by the unseen forces that occasionally reveal an intricate narrative briefly perceivable. It was the next day, or that same day, or a different night, that you found yourself taking a quick picture of the man as he stood patiently waiting beneath his own engraved name in the blazing rays of the graveyard. That name, his same name, was presently labeling a mausoleum. No strangers were present, or if they were, you couldn't see them. There was no proof. That night, and then again, that same day, you knew that when he looked at you, you would shift your gaze away, that when he looked at you, you would hide. Perhaps it was night, perhaps a different day. You knew you would veil your startled stare so that he could not grasp or catch your very instant vision of his death in the black and brittle, damp and bewildered echo of your loud eyes, because as you found then, and as you note now, there is never any proof. There is never any sufficient evidence. So to you, there is also no truer, tender kindness than disguise. But recognize, one can always find that loving feeling by returning to the mausoleum. Thanks.